the Indian Ocean region and what you think success looks like.
Well, I think I spoke last night, and frankly I've spoken probably at length about the attributes of the region we want. I've talked about peace, stability and prosperity, sovereignty being respected, that is the capacity or the ability to make your own decisions, to chart your own course, to ensure that no one country dominates, no country is dominated, to ensure that rules and norms and deal with are the way in which we navigate or manage disputes rather than simply the assertion of power. But if I can go back to where you started, which was the point about agency, I think the sort of central proposition is that the sort of region we want, the attributes we describe, doesn't happen without us doing something. So there's often a sense that if we're neutral or passive or keep our heads down, that things will be all right. I think if we want the sort of region we, I think, collectively aspire to, we have to do something, and the thing we have to do is to work together, to collaborate in relation to shared problems and to find shared solutions. I had a meeting this morning with my friend from Mauritius, and he talked about navigation. And it's a good way to think about it, because we're all navigating a world where there's there's strategic contest, there's climate change, there's transnational crimes. How do we best navigate that? What we think is we best navigate that together. That doesn't mean we're always going to agree, but we're much better if we seek to have the habit of collaboration and cooperation so that we can achieve a region with those attributes.
Minister, thank you. And if I can just make an aside, I was Australia's High Commissioner to Mauritius, and the Minister and I were talking earlier about our plan to make sure Mauritius takes over this conference, and I think we're really succeeding in that objective.
He just did.
Minister, I want to take off from your point on togetherness and collaboration and move over to Minister Jaishankar. You're a frequent traveller to Australia. You talked last night about the strategic significance of India's relationship with Australia. Could you tell us a bit more about your vision for this relationship?
It's interesting that frequent traveller is the word which comes to your mind, because actually when one looks at our own history, perhaps others should have travelled a little more frequently and built it up. The truth is actually, in many ways, we're two societies which have so much in common and so much complementary. We've really not done full justice to the potential of our relationship. In fact, when I was trying to sum up India-Australia relations in about 1,000 words for my book, one of my discoveries was we actually didn't even have a prime ministerial visit for the first 2 decades after our independence. And now when I look at the last decade, which has really been the decade in which the relationship has grown, you see a very different picture. I spoke about it yesterday. Political signals do matter. Certainly, I would say for us, it was a very strong message that on the first day of this government in Australia, the Prime Minister and the Foreign Minister were on a plane to Tokyo for our meeting. People don't take that lightly. Now, in terms of our ties, we have today a really growing bilateral relationship, which has seen, obviously, with the ECTA economic kind of boost. We are on the defense security side, we've seen it grow. There's much greater contacts between our policymakers, more interface between our military forces. Politically, definitely far many more conversations. So, but most of all, I think if one looks at a societal level, look at the growth of the community, the number of students, the new consulates, for example, you have established, we are planning to establish. That's also a big change in the making. That's on the bilateral side. Now we have 2 trilaterals, maybe we'll have more in the years to come with France, Indonesia. We have a very important quadrilateral. If one looks at the other organizations of which we are members, IORA, for example, we are both closely involved with the East Asia Summit process. So at multiple levels today, really, Australia and India are doing very much more with each other. So would I give ourselves a good report card? Yes. But like all teachers, I would say plenty of room to grow. Definitely, I think we could be doing much more on the business side, on the economic side. We should be encouraging more direct contacts in a way, because a lot of what we are still doing is mediated by other forums. I don't have an issue with that. I think it provides comfort, but I'm pretty sure, say, a few years from now, somebody would present an even stronger report card than we're doing today.
Well, thank you for that, Minister Jaishankar. Perhaps if I could turn immediately to you, Minister Wong, for a response to perhaps share with us how you see the Australia-India relationship benefiting this region.
I'm first going to tell a story and just say appreciate everything Joe's done for the relationship since we took office. It's been remarkable. But he was actually my first ministerial bilateral in Tokyo. And it wasn't my finest moment because we just got off the plane.
And you look good.
Well, I'm glad I look good, but I was barely thinking because I'd literally been sworn in at the end of an election campaign, got on the plane when I went to meet him. So, it's we have friendship going right back to the beginning, as it were. I'd endorse everything Jai has said about complementarity and the depth of our ties. If I could just take, all of that is true, but if I could just bring it up to from another perspective, I think it's also about where we are. Like if you think geography is not everything, but it does matter, and if you think about where we are and where India is, and the perspective we both have on the Indo-Pacific, and our intrinsic understanding because of who we are and where we are of the connectivity between those oceans, and the desire to see that both the Indian Ocean and the Pacific Ocean as peaceful, stable and prosperous in the way we've discussed. I think we bring that perspective to the Indian Ocean. I think there's a lot of complementarity too. We're much smaller, not geographically, but in terms of population and weight. We bring certain perspectives and certain strengths, and obviously India is such a great power in the region and globally, and continuing to be more so. So, we share the objectives of the stability, prosperity, peace that I have described, and we are both, activist is not the word, but willing to engage and work at achieving it. So it comes in many ways back to the agency point that you started with.
And I think in both of your addresses last night, you both really clearly outlined when Australia looks out into the Pacific, it sees a particular set of strategic dynamics. And India, looking out into the Indian Ocean, sees these same strategic dynamics. There's enormous complementarity in terms of working together to confront the challenges that are crossing the Indo-Pacific region. Minister Jaishankar, could you tell us a little more about how India is partnering with other Indian Ocean countries to build stability for the region? And does India have plans to elevate your regional engagement?
Again, what has been, we ourselves are in a process of evolution here. For the first time, we have a kind of an integrated maritime view, which obviously has an impact across the Indian Ocean. where we look at the ocean, the littorals, the global commons in a way together. There are pre-existing formats and organizations in the Indian Ocean region. We are members of most of them. We've tried to initiate a few ourselves. And my sense is that, we would probably make a difference through this network of overlapping organizations and activities, really to kind of energize each one of them and in an aggregate contribute very much more. If one steps back, what happens in diplomacy is you tend to look at the activity of the day or the particular meeting or relationship you are dealing with. But take a historical look at the Indian Ocean. Essentially, there was a certain seamlessness about the Indian Ocean. Okay? You had in history people from the Pacific Islands who would actually probably the greatest navigators of their times, who would come deep into the Indian Ocean. There are communities in Madagascar whose origins are probably at the far end of Indonesia. You have Arabs who sailed from the Gulf to China. You had Indians. If you look at Indian cultural footprint, both sides, all the way to East Africa on the one side, Southeast Africa, to the Fujian coast in China. What happened was the colonial period kind of broke this up. It disrupted it. And I would say in a historical sense, the challenge today is to reconstruct and reconnect the Indian Ocean. So we have a range of activities. We tend to think of them differently. We tend to think of maritime flows in a certain, in one silo, land connectivity in another, the hinterland to the ocean as a third silo. But they are actually all a kind of re-coming together of a broken or a disrupted whole. And I think to that extent we are able to do that. The personality, collective personality of the Indian Ocean in a way comes out better. I think there are a lot of things which, we are a fundamentally pluralistic region, which, yesterday at the lunch which Penny was gracious enough to host, there were two words which stuck in my mind, One was patience and one was respect. These were described as the values which, are most prized in a way. But I think if you can actually patiently and respectfully reconstruct this region, we would have done ourselves a great service.
Thank you. Can I just
pick up on that? I think that Jai has very eloquently spoken about the seamlessness of the ocean, and I think Vivian yesterday reminded us of the sort of a very important aspect of that, which is the centrality of freedom of navigation and the ocean as a public good, the economic reason for that. But can I just come to the point about plurality and about patience and respect? How do you do that? How do you work together and on common and shared challenges in a way that reflects the plurality of the region? We think a central way in which you do that is by ensuring that you have regional architecture that is inclusive, that is able, strong enough and resilient enough and respected enough for differences of views to be dealt with, so that you best navigate these issues through that regional architecture and through multilateralism.
Absolutely, and we're really fortunate to have with us at the conference over this couple of days representatives of the regional architecture institutions in the Indian Ocean, the Indian Ocean Commission, the Indian Ocean Rim Association, BIMSTEC. But I think you're right, there's a piece of work to do to start to really strengthen those institutions, because the pluralistic nature of the region is inherently challenging and difficult to grapple with.
And Joe's point about making it seamless.
Yep.
So not thinking about it, and this is for us as well, like I think Australia, we are, we look to the Pacific and we look to, the parts of the Indian Ocean which are near us. And I think it's about actually seeing this in a much more seamless way and making sure that the regional architecture reflects that in how it operates.
Can I jump off, Minister Wong, from the point about the Pacific, because something that struck me as Australia's High Commissioner in Mauritius and covering Western Indian Ocean islands was the real desire to learn from the Pacific experience. And so I wonder if you could share from your experience what you think might be the lessons that the Pacific could share with Indian Ocean island states, but the region as a whole as well.
Very similar sets of challenges, aren't they?
Absolutely.
Small island states, not all, obviously Papua New Guinea is larger, in a region which has known a lot of great power contest in the Pacific conflict, historically. Grappling today and now with climate change. I'm going to tell one anecdote, then I'll come back to the story. I had a Pacific Island leader say to me once, we always hoped that we could just, that the great power competition, we could just duck and hide from it, and that they wouldn't notice us. And they said that, now we know that's not the case. And with climate change, that we can't just duck and hide from it. I think there are many lessons from the Pacific. I've learned a lot as Foreign Minister in my time so far engaging with Pacific Island nations. There's a lot of wisdom in the Pacific, and one of the wisdoms or one of the insights is the importance of the Pacific Islands Forum and that community, which is it's based on ocean. Now, for an Australian, because we come from this big landmass, to hear how people identify and connect through ocean, it's a very different way of understanding the world. They are very committed to navigating so many of the challenges together, whether it's great power competition, strategic competition, COVID, climate change, through their regional organisation, through the forum, the Pacific family. Now, that's not perfect, but what it does mean is you get, it's a way of ensuring that smaller states, and sometimes fragile states, are not sort of alone and buffeted by those sorts of tendencies and dynamics.
Thank you, Minister Wong. Minister Jaishankar, could I get your response to that perspective? I'm really interested in India's views about regional architecture in the Indian Ocean and what you'd like to see.
Well, let me actually just add a bit to the Pacific Islands bit. As we grow, and when you grow, your capabilities grow, your interest grows, your acquaintanceship grows. Again, one of the changes in the Indian Ocean region in the last decade has been a very steady, still incipient evolution of India's own relationship with this region. And we had, as you know, a historical connect with Fiji, but today, if one looks at the totality of the Pacific Islands, in different ways, particularly when it comes to development cooperation. We are trying to see if, there are ways by which we can contribute by, what we are generally trying to do across the Indian Ocean, which is capacity building, sharing of experiences, training. Can we bring some of that to the Pacific Islands as well? We have some ideas here. We had a very good summit in Papua New Guinea last year, and we certainly hope to focus on areas like health, to some degree space applications, education in different ways, because these we believe are our strengths. In terms of regional architecture, again, we're not going to see from Australia to Africa a kind of an all-encompassing canvas. That's not realistic, and it's also it would be a bit forced, and it would. In a sense, we need to recognize the pluralism and the intensity of more sub-regional activities out there. So I would be, to me, what's more natural would be if we have different groupings and platforms and mechanisms. The more they connect up with each other and reinforce each other, that's a very practical way of actually progressing. If I were to come and tell about 50 countries saying, look, let's all get together, it will take us years, decades to get that moving. But I listed some of them yesterday in my talk, that today we have an IRA, we have in the Bay of Bengal a BIMSTEC, there are the ASEAN processes, you have the PIF, and we have a relationship today with the Pacific Islands. We have a Colombo Security Conclave, which covers the Western Central Indian Ocean. We have our relationship with the Gulf, with the East African. So I think this kind of crisscrossing, reinforcing, overlapping, and the more we socialize, one of the good things about this conference to me is really the very diverse nature of the participants. So I'm sure each one of us today, after these 2 days, would go back meeting a few people we had not met before, and would have sort of broadened our sense of the Indian Ocean. I would say, in a way, what we need is a kind of a consultative, democratic kind of culture, but a culture which really encourages more of us to work with each other.
Can I make a point about multilateralism, please? Yes, thank you. I think both in the Pacific and in the Indian Ocean, you see smaller island nations working to use or to press their interests in the multilateral system. And one of the things we believe as Australia, because we because of who we are and our history and our values and our interests are very committed multilateralists, is to think about how it is we best work with different parts of our region in the multilateral system. And there are, I think, two really good examples of that which demonstrate that ensuring that countries, nations with similar objectives work together in the multilateral system to deliver outcomes, even though we might be, quite different. We work very closely with the Pacific Island nations and others on the WTO reforms around illegal and unregulated, I should say, fishing subsidies, and that was a big engagement between Australia and the whole range of countries for whom fishing, protecting their fish stocks is such a central part of their economy, but also their survival. I think that the High Seas Treaty was Australia and the Seychelles and others worked very hard on that, and that's another example where we can together work in the multilateral system on things where there really is, we have similar interests, but even though we come from different perspectives and places.
So the message that's coming through really clearly, there's no single answer. We need strong regional architecture, we need strong engagement with the multilateral system, we need plurilateral approaches. Would you mind expanding a little bit on what you see as the role of the Quad in the Indian Ocean?
He always is better at explaining the Quad than I reckon.
I might ask for Minister Jaishankar's comment immediately after as well.
I think there's a lot. The Quad is for quite different countries, that come together to try and, because we share certain principles about how we want to operate in the world and the sort of world and region that we want, and we want to work together on some key public goods for the region. And you've seen that with vaccines, you've seen that in terms of humanitarian relief, you've seen that in terms of maritime domain. These are capabilities which benefit the region. It's also, in a world where there's a lot happening, I think it is a forum where we have a very granular and detailed discussion about our perspectives, about where things are going and what needs to be done. Like I find it a very rewarding forum to engage in, because I get the perspective from India, the United States, Japan, and I hope we bring something to it. And each of us can, on the various things on which we're working, bring our particular set of expertises and perspective to it.
Mr. Jaishankar?
Well, when it comes to Quad, I think it's important, first of all, to appreciate why and how it came about, because it tells us something about where it would be going. To a large extent, I think it's an outcome, obviously, of the big picture geopolitics changing. I think capabilities of the major powers also changing, and the implications that it has for all of us, including for the global commons. And I think particularly the changed posture and the changed weight of the US relative to the rest of the world and relative to countries of this region is very, very critical. The second aspect, and this is an Indian perspective, is it also reflects three very important relationships with Australia, with the US, with Japan, which have transformed after the end of the Cold War. So if you look at the big picture change, and then these three key relationships, three bilateral relationships changing, then they kind of come together today to really create the Quad. Now, I've seen it grow over a period of time. I was associated even the first, the abortive venture 15 years ago. And it so happened, I was the permanent secretary when we restarted it a decade later, and then as a minister came back to it when we raised it to a level of minister, and finally even attended the first summit. What's to me really interesting about the Quad? Every meeting of the Quad we've done, we've actually come up with a few more things to do. If you look at the agenda, literally meeting by meeting, it has grown. And that, to me, bodes very well for the future of the Quad. The other point I would make to supplement what Penny said, just think of it on the map of the world. You have this enormous maritime space, and you have these 4 Quad countries who are who are located in a way at 4 corners of this maritime space. And each one of them, as she pointed out, brings a certain perspective and a certain view to the table. So I sort of pretty confidently predict that Quad, the relevance of Quad would grow, that it would become a bigger factor in the larger regional and beyond the region politics and policy.
Minister, thank you. And I should take this opportunity to personally thank you in India, because I was the beneficiary of Quad collaboration during COVID, because the first COVID vaccine that was able to enter Mauritius was Covishield from India. So it's thanks to India and the Quad collaboration that I remained COVID-free throughout my time in Mauritius. So thank you. Ministers, we're rapidly running out of time, so I wanted to give both of you an opportunity to offer some closing comments. If I start with you, Minister Jaishankar, some key messages, what are the key takeaways that you would like everyone at this conference to take away in terms of India's vision for the region?
Well, one, I would like to correct something which Penny said yesterday. She said, I think you said you are a middle power. I think in cricket you are a superpower. So we learned it last.
Look, we've got a couple of pretty amazing people.
So I really think today that the Indian Ocean is a subject on which there should be greater effort and energy, greater focus. We need it at different levels. I mean, the diplomacy has to do what it has to do. We need conferences like this. I would hope somewhere we can even get some kind of business version of it, or in different domains, a kind of a pan-Indian Ocean connectivity and contacts built up. Where India-Australia relations are concerned, I feel, again, I'm very bullish about it. I feel, great possibilities, I mean, if one looks at what we've achieved in the last decade, there's reasons to be optimistic. In this region, as I said, our footprint, our levels of engagement are growing with different partners from the Pacific Islands. With ASEAN, ASEAN for us has a very special meaning because it has been associated with the era of reform. What started for us as Look East became Act East, and as that Act East has led us today further and further east. So overall, I would say you are going to see an India which will be much more deeply engaged in and much more deeply invested in the Indian Ocean. And I end really with a repetition of my historical point, which is, our goal should be how to make the Indian Ocean more connected, more seamless, more interpenetrative than it is today, as it has been in the past. And I really appreciate the efforts of the organizers of this conference to that end.
Minister Wong, the final word to you.
Well, I think first, where are we? We live in a time where our region and our world are being reshaped strategically, economically, and also by climate. The question for all of us as politicians, as diplomats, is what do we do with that? To my way of thinking, to Australia's way of thinking, is we want to be part of that reshaping. And we want to be part of that reshaping in order to assure, as best as we are able in this generation, that the next generation of our children and our grandchildren live in a region that has the attributes that we want, that a region which is peaceful, stable and prosperous, in which countries are able to make their own choices. To do that, we want to collaborate, we want to engage, we want to work collectively within the regional structures and also multilaterally, and Australia will do that with you. We will do so respectfully, with some humility also, because we understand there's many parts of this ocean that we are less familiar with, but always with that purpose that we bring to it, which is the sort of world and region in which we want to live. So I want to thank everybody for making the effort to come to Australia. We appreciate you visiting our Indian Ocean capital. I want to thank Jai for his leadership and his wisdom. and for encouraging me to host this conference. And I'm very glad I listened to him. So thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, for their opportunity, thank the ministers. Ministers, after you.
I think you'll all agree with me that there is a level of